Proofs of undoubted frauds brought to light, read the New York Times headline on July 22, 1871. The article running beneath it communicated even more shocking news. The people controlling the city politics were stealing money by the barrelful. In the late 19th century, New York City politics were controlled by a political machine known as Tammany Society. Under the rule of Boss Tweed, the group stole money from the city. However, many people were unaware of the corruption because Tweed was communicating lies to them. In this setting, Thomas Nast, a political cartoonist, became a symbol of informative, persuasive communication, a powerful weapon used to help reformers fight the reign of Boss Tweed. With the rapid growth of immigration and the extension of the vote to lower-class citizens, the political cartoon had the capability of representing a large idea in an understandable manner. It became an influential form of communication because many people could not read the newspapers.
Cartooning is communicating, but it's communicating in a very quick and hopefully precise way, a nugget of an idea. And it's something that's easy to remember. It's hard to remember a long text about some issue, but it's easy to remember that image.
With the end of the Civil War in 1865, the Reconstruction era began. New York City became the largest commercial, manufacturing, and financial center. This eventually led to the formation of a new power structure, the political machine. Dominated by a political boss, the machine was a well-organized group that controlled the political activities of a large area. The machine understood the needs of the poor and was able to communicate with them. Tammany Hall was a political machine in New York City. It was founded in 1789 by Revolutionary War veterans as a charitable club. The society became a democratic political organization in the 19th century as working-class men took charge. By the end of the 1800s, Tammany Hall was in control of city politics. Although these political machines were corrupt, they could solve matters quickly and efficiently. See how beautiful a Tammany city government runs with a so-called boss directing the whole shooting match, explained George Washington Plunkett, a Tammany leader. If there's any differences of opinion, the Tammany leader settles them quietly. In the mid-1850s, William M. Tweed, a young politician, became a member of Tammany Hall. By Tweed's time, the organization was a circle of political friends who kept tight control on New York City to benefit their own interests. By the end of the Civil War, Tweed was known as Boss Tweed and was in complete control of Tammany Hall politics. Tweed and his henchmen, Peter Brain Sweeney, the city chamberlain, Richard Slippery Dick Connolly, the city comptroller, and Abraham Oakey Hall, the mayor, were known as the Tweed Ring. Tammany-backed Democrats in the state capital of Albany gave Tweed statewide power. He was a native of the city and a former member of the working class. At the same time, he was a skillful manipulator who knew how to use public approval for his benefit. He understood the poor and gave them what they wanted. Working with the Catholic Church and the labor unions, the Tweed Ring raised funds to build hospitals, homes for the poor, and orphanages. They helped support schools and found jobs for the unemployed. In return, grateful recipients flocked to the polls on Election Day and voted the way Tammany told them to. At the height of his power, Tweed was raking in the money at the city's expense. Money obtained by graft was affording Tweed a lavish lifestyle, but this opulence merely served to expose his corrupt political dealings to even his most loyal supporters. Between 1868 and 1870, the city debt increased by more than $80 million. The spectacle is appalling, stated poet Walt Whitman. The official services are saturated in corruption, bribery, falsehood, and scoundrelism. By 1870, news publications, including the New York Times, were at work to destroy Tweed. But perhaps the single individual most responsible for bringing down Tammany Hall and informing the masses about the injustice perpetrated by political machines and Boss Tweed was Thomas Nast. Employed by Harper's Weekly as a political cartoonist, Nast published many cartoons attacking the Tweed Ring. Nast had arrived in New York from Germany at the age of 6. He initially worked as an illustrator for Frank Leslie's illustrated newspaper and as a Civil War correspondent. He was a radical Republican committed to equal citizenship and racial equality, and his cartoons communicated his political beliefs. He was opposed to Southern violence against freedmen, denying Indians the vote, and excluding Chinese immigrants. However, his most famous crusade was against the Tweed Ring. In the spring of 1871, as rumors about New York City's debt began to circulate, the new bookkeeper, M.J. O'Rourke, gathered highly incriminating evidence of city and county accounts. It was given to the New York Times. On July 8, 1871, the paper ran the first in a series of damning articles that communicated a long list of Tweed's crimes. Although the newspapers had published harsh editorials against Tweed, they did not affect him as did the visual cartoons of Thomas Nast. Nast depicted Tweed as an overweight, power-hungry tyrant, controlling the politics of New York. People understood the intentions of these illustrations, and no words were necessary to explain the picture. Tweed knew that these cartoons could hurt him most among the people who supported him. Tweed reacted, "I don't care what people write, for my constituents can't read, but damn it, they have eyes and they can see pictures." Tweed, trying to use a bribe to fix his problem, offered Nast $500,000 to stop drawing his cartoons. Nast turned the boss down. "I don't think I'll do it," he replied. "I made up my mind not long ago to put some of these fellows behind bars, and I'm going to put them there." The news media had communicated to the public the need for reform. On September 4, 1871, the Committee of 70, a group of prominent citizens, was created to prosecute Tweed and take down the Tammany Hall ring. Henry Stebbins was elected chairman, along with August Belmont and Samuel Tilden, who had plans to run for president. A ruling was issued on September 7th that restrained any official from spending money. Immediately, Tammany Hall offices were ransacked, records were destroyed, and the cover-ups began. Tilden's report on October 25th traced huge sums of money from the city contractors to Tweed's bank account. Tweed was arrested the next day. Henry Stebbins said in his final report on November 2nd, "There is not in the history of villainy a parallel to thy gigantic crime against property conspired by the Tammany ring. If we fail to punish them, will not the capitalists of Europe conclude that our institutions are a failure, and that it is unsafe to lend and sell to a people whose rulers are thieves and whose legislators are robbers?" Finally, on the eve of Tweed's election, Nast published his most influential cartoon, the infamous Tammany Tiger, dramatically illustrating the evil nature of the Tweed ring. Ironically, on Election Day, 2 weeks after his arrest, Tweed was re-elected as state senator, amidst allegations of voting fraud. Despite Tweed's electoral victory, however, his associates were defeated. In the aftermath of the election, Tammany Hall's Sweeney and Connolly fled the country, and Mayor Hall came to trial but was acquitted. As for Tweed, he became the only one blamed for the corruption that had taken place. Tweed was indicted on 120 counts. His first trial ended without a verdict, his second with a 12-year sentence. He escaped from jail and fled to Spain. But the image of Tweed created by Nast was so widely known that Spanish officials, although unable to read English, recognized him from Nast's work. As a result, they sent him back to the United States, and in 1878, he died in prison. Although Boss Tweed is now considered to be one of the most corrupt politicians in American history, this was not the case in his own day. At his funeral, a journalist reminded the public, "Let us remember that Tweed fell without loss of reputation among the bulk of his supporters. The poorer voters of this city today revere his memory and look on him as a victim of rich men's malice, as, in short, a friend to the needy who applied public funds to the purposes which they ought to be applied."
In fact, the bosses did perform essential services. They got the trash picked up. They took care of people in their wards or districts of the city. They made sure that they didn't starve. They handed out patronage jobs. They made sure that cities operated, that they functioned at a time of great stress for cities.
Throughout the nation, however, political reformers rejoiced at the fall of the Tweed ring and their notorious leader, Boss Tweed. Tweed had bankrupted New York City and become rich at the public's expense. Their theft ran up a debt New Yorkers were still paying off well into the 20th century. In the years that followed the downfall of Tweed, bosses and machines, although still present, became more organized, more effective, and ever more responsive to the voters. In many ways, the mid to late 1800s had been dark times, made even darker by the corruption of government. Yet those troubled decades gave rise to a new era, where politicians began to communicate more honestly to their delegates, where the politicians understood the wants of the citizens, and the citizens understood the intentions of their leaders. Little can be said of Boss Tweed and his ring that is positive. However, it was Tweed's excesses that communicated the vulnerabilities of public servants and political systems and strengthened the resolve to right those terrible wrongs. Today, political cartoons continue to be used as an influential tool in politics to communicate ideas and opinions. However, no one else has gained as much recognition as Thomas Nast, creator of such political symbols as the Democratic donkey, Republican elephant, and Uncle Sam.
All editorial cartoonists know Thomas Nast, and he's considered the father of the modern art. But Nast was the guy who really elevated it to a new art form.
His crusade against the Tweed ring made him a celebrity, but most of all, he paved the way for a more morally run city. He detested political corruption and felt that it was his responsibility to take matters into his own hands. He not only communicated the existence of blatant corruption and the need for reform, but also made people understand they had the power to make those changes.